Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, the climate guy setting the record straight about climate. This video is titled Preparing for the Next Big Arctic Scam. Over the next few days, we're going to start hearing hysterics from the press and climate scientists about Arctic sea ice is the lowest on record and hardly grew at all during January. I created an animation to show what's been going on in the Arctic during January. As you can see, the ice has been getting compressed towards the North Pole from both the Atlantic side and from the Pacific side. Winds have been compressing it, and ice along the Russian coast is the thickest it's been in the last 15 years. The yellow and red colors represent ice which is more than 10 feet thick. And as you can see, the northern sea route along the Russian coast is completely blocked with extremely thick ice. This is going to make commerce impossible for quite a long time, even with a big icebreaker. The extent of ice is low this winter exactly for the same reasons why it's thick. The ice has been blowing in from both sides, which reduces the extent. You can see how the extent is getting decreased along the Atlantic side here, and you can't see it on the Pacific side, but the same thing's been occurring. These winds compressing the ice towards the pole cause a small extent, but a high thickness near the pole. The conditions which would create the opposite, a high extent, would also create a low thickness. That's because the ice would be thinning and spreading out away from the pole. If climate scientists were really worried about the ice, they'd be happy that the ice is being compressed towards the pole and getting thicker. That means it'll be harder to melt this summer and we'll have a higher summer extent. But that won't stop them from claiming the exact opposite. All of the maps and graphs I've shown you so far in this video are from the Danish Meteorological Institute. And they show that the ice has gotten much thicker over the last 10 years. This was January 26, 2008. You can see that the ice around the North Pole was very thin, and the ice along the Russian coast was extremely thin. Now the ice has gotten much thicker in the center of the Arctic, and along the Russian coast it's much, much thicker now than it was 10 years ago. In fact, the ice was so thin 10 years ago that our top fake scientists and fake news sources predicted that the North Pole would be ice-free that summer. Their prediction from 10 years ago was ridiculous, but it was based on the fact that the ice near the North Pole was very thin 10 years ago. Well, this year the ice is much, much thicker, and you won't be seeing any predictions of an ice-free North Pole from government scientists this summer. However, you will hear government scientists saying that the ice is melting faster than ever and that we're headed in the future towards an ice-free North Pole, the same one they predicted 10 years ago for that summer. But here's the real problem for climate alarmists. Summer temperatures, which are the red line here, have been running well below normal in recent years. The green line is the 1958 to 2002 average. Every single day last summer was below normal temperature, and this has been a fairly typical pattern over the last decade. Summers have been cold near the North Pole. Most of the claims of record heat we've been hearing from NASA are due to the fact that winter temperatures near the North Pole have been running about 5 degrees centigrade above normal. They've been running about minus 25 degrees centigrade instead of minus 30 degrees centigrade. Yes, these are the hot temperatures we've been hearing about from the government. Minus 25 degrees centigrade is the new hot. So what's causing these warm winter temperatures? Well, that's easy. We've been getting big dips in the jet stream, which have been bringing snow to the Sahara Desert, snow to Florida, snow to Saudi Arabia. The cold air coming from the Arctic is being displaced by warmer air from the lower latitudes. This makes the Arctic warm, and this makes the Sahara Desert and Florida cold. What we're going to be hearing over the next few weeks is how the Arctic is doomed, how the ice extent is the lowest on record, and it's all going to melt this summer. Well, they've got the exact opposite problem. The ice has been getting compressed towards the pole, and Arctic summer temperatures, which are the only time the ice can melt, have been running very cold. So they have a combination of thick ice and cold temperatures. This is a disaster for climate alarmists, but they won't talk about it even if they understand it. Summer temperatures have been running cold in the Arctic in recent years, but in 1940 that wasn't the case. The ice in the Arctic was melting very rapidly. October 13, 1940, Washington, the ice of the Arctic Ocean is melting so rapidly that more than one-third of it has disappeared in the last 50 years. Arctic ice and Arctic temperatures are cyclical. It was very warm in the Arctic in the 1940s and the ice was disappearing very rapidly. In 1939, our top scientists said that the glaciers of Greenland and Norway were facing the possibility of a catastrophic collapse. It was very warm back then. This graph is from NASA, and the yellow line shows the measured temperatures at the capital of Iceland. You can see that 1940s was the warmest time they've ever had there, warmer than it is now. But NASA dealt with this by just simply erasing the warmth of the 1940s. They turned this cooling trend into a warming trend by tampering with the data. And what happened after 1940 is that the Arctic got much colder, the ice got much thicker. When you see Arctic sea ice graphs from the government, they always start in 1979, even though they have ice data much earlier than 1979. The reason they start in 1979 is that it was an extremely cold year, and then the Arctic warmed after that. This allows them to make it look like the ice is disappearing, when in fact Arctic ice and Arctic temperatures are totally cyclical. The thing is a complete scam. This graph is from the 1990 IPCC report, and it shows Arctic sea ice extent measured from satellites. The data is from NOAA. Current graphs start in 1979 right at the peak, and they throw out all of this inconvenient data from prior to 1979 when Arctic sea ice extent was much lower. By throwing this out, they're able to create a linear downwards trend, which is not representative of anything other than the fraud of the climate scientists. The global warming climate change scam is going to go on endlessly until Congress defunds it. Hopefully they will do that soon. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science for a long time.